Listeners of the Randomness of Nothing podcast, this is your host, Rashad Woods. I always believe that inspiration, entrepreneurship, and taking ownership of your life is one of the pinnacles in the creativity of this show. And I've been honored to be blessed with a guest today by the name of J.C. Chamberlain. He's a multi-talented entrepreneur that not only believes that business success is important, but personal and physical growth as well, too. And he has a compelling story he's willing to share it with this audience today. And I'm honored to have him as a guest today. Thank you, sir.
Glad to be here. Thank you, Rashad.
I very much appreciate you. I've never quite seen a background like this in all the guests that I've had. You're the epitome of the overachiever, right? And I say this very respectfully.
Even when I got prostate cancer on day one, and a 5 or a 6 PSA is a bad score, and mine was 45. And somebody said to me, "You're just a classic overachiever." You'd had to have a higher score.
Oh my God. Well, I'm glad that even in that, stage of your life, they were still, somebody who was close to you was still trying to, find some levity to lift you up and uplift you. But I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're through that phase in life. And more importantly, I think that your positivity shines very thoroughly and authentically. And can you please tell us about your business background as well as all your accomplishments?
There you go.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, I would love to hear you be able to share your background.
All right. Say it again. What's your question?
I would love for you to be able to share your background for the show.
Okay. Gosh, where do I begin? I think it started when I was about 4 years old. I got rheumatic fever. Oh. And all I knew about hospitals at that age was that people went there to die. And that was a very, immature view of the world. But I refused to go to the hospital. And they said that if I couldn't walk to the bathroom from my bed, that I was going to have to go to the hospital. So I found a way to do that at that age. And so I didn't go to the hospital, but one of my valves didn't heal right. And so I had a heart murmur. And they eventually put me on very strict medicine for that. And they said that I was never going to be able to do sports. And when you tell a 6-year-old that he can't play baseball, it was just tearing my heart out. And so I sat down with my record player, and I was on my knees in front of the record player singing with the Vienna Boys Choir, and eventually convinced my parents to rent me a violin.
Wonderful.
And that resulted in practicing 3 hours a day and throwing myself into something different than sports. And what I learned from that experience was that I could reframe a bad situation into an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And from there, that pattern emerged as my theme for my life. And I've been doing it ever since. I've been helping people turn businesses around that were in trouble, both small businesses, big business, family-owned enterprises, right on up to divisional Fortune 500 conglomerates.
That's amazing.
And so I've had an amazing test of that philosophy that we can reframe bad things into good things. Right. And so that's the topic of my next book, which is about reframing to gain your emotional wealth superpowers, which are willpower and core power. And I'm happy to explain. But it came out of my lived experience, which is that we have this high performance mindset that's right at our fingertips, and we can tap into it anytime. Just the right mindset.
Yeah, I think people tend to get discouraged because, I think people have a tendency, especially, even now, because they see things more visually very quickly, of an instant gratification, right? You can order food as quick, like, for example, you can order food quicker than you ever have. That doesn't mean the process of making the food itself has gotten any quicker if you order a pizza on an app. But it's the instant gratification that people are used to, and they're not willing to realize that things take time to grow and cultivate and kind of, quote unquote, being in the trenches when things don't go your way, right? And that's hard because oftentimes those moments are by yourself, and you really have to have the collective thoughts and the willpower to be able to see when things don't go your way. When you do have to go to things, then, you may be the only person trying to make a sale and you get no, and you have to refine your process and your pitch in order to be successful, because people like to be instantly gratified, similar to losing weight. It's an ongoing process, not an immediate overnight success, so to speak.
You know what Carrie Fisher of Star Wars fame she said, instant gratification is just not fast enough anymore.
It's true. It's true.
But I tell you, my mother would say to us when we were young, and I have one brother, so she would speak to both of us, and she would say, "Don't worry, nothing is going to be okay."
Mm.
And at first, you think, well, that kind of a negative mindset, but what she really meant, and what she schooled us in, was that if you show up for life over prepared, you're going to be able to react when life doesn't go your way.
Right.
And that allows us to have an antidote for, all the bad things that are going to happen.
Right.
We learned that we could invest in our own, what I call emotional bank accounts.
Yes.
And that gives us a resource when things turn south.
And they will, and they inevitably will, right? It's not a question of, quarterly earnings come out with companies, stalwarts that you thought would be, part of the American landscape forever in business, suddenly find themselves, struggling overnight because of changing consumer trends, because of bad purchases. We can go on and on about the stories, that have happened. I was an intern at Sears, and we all know that Sears was the Amazon of its time. It was revolutionary. Right. It had the catalog, and then now it's basically, for all intents and purposes, non-existent right now. I do want to pivot briefly before we talk about your book, about your entrepreneurial career, because you've had a absolutely stellar background in entrepreneurship. You had Vet Power, which was a pet appointment scheduler, was an appointment master. Can you dive into that a little bit, please?
Sure. One of the things that I sat down with a guy named Bill Hambrecht, who was Hambrecht and Quest founder, and it was in the early 2000s that I sat down with him, before the Apple Watch came out, mm-hmm. before the iPhone, any of that. And he was a legendary private equity investor. And he said, look for the things that other people ignore.
Beautiful.
Look for the things that other people ignore.
Beautiful.
And see if you can do them better.
That's amazing.
And that simple rule, I went out of my, I had a very rare face-to-face with this legendary investor. Mm-hmm. And there were about 7 or 8 of us that sat with him and peppered him with questions about what was the next startup that we could get involved with. But he more importantly, he gave us some rules to go by. And one of them is look for the mundane things in everyday life and then see if you can find a way to improve them. And one of the things that we had started out creating a online scheduling program for dental offices. And we perfected the platform, but it was going nowhere because there was a lot of competition in dental. Yeah. And frankly, people don't like their dentist.
They give you that card, right? They give you that card that they tell you to be back in like 4 months. And you're like,
right.
And you're like, dude, I don't need.
You're like,
no, you're just pitching it. You're like, I don't want.
That's right. I would like to wait longer.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we looked for something that had, in order to increase our volume of business, we looked for a market where there were a lot higher volume of appointments and people were in love with the practitioners. And that turned out to be veterinary science.
Unbelievable.
And we built an online scheduling platform so that people could schedule their pet appointments online by on their phone. And that basically we became the communications platform for the veterinary hospital.
That's amazing.
And that enabled us to scale. We got into a contract with the number one vendor of distribution software in that market. And it allowed us to scale up to 3,000 hospitals on 3 continents, all English speaking. But what we did was we proved the model, and that allowed us to ultimately, move into scheduling appointments using an automated virtual attendant. So there's things that have grown out of that now with the advent of machine learning and supplemental intelligence, artificial intelligence. We now have the ability to know who's calling, what the names of their pets are, and interact with them and give them an option. Frankly, if you want to speak to the front desk, press 1. If you'd like to continue with the automated attendant, press 2. And it's amazing how many people press 2. because they don't want to deal with the bottleneck at the front desk. So a
Without
mundane
question.
thing,
And
scheduling a pet
but you're
appointment,
doing
but
that.
it turned out that,
But you're doing that at
sorry,
the
go ahead.
before this became normal, right? I said you're doing this before this became like part of the norm of everyday life. So you found this out. Now it's nothing to have all these online appointments for people. This is the standard that people are having. But to do something like that, 20 years ago was unheard of, right? People weren't thinking
Yeah,
about
it
that.
was
Oh, I have
almost 20 years ago that we started it. Yeah.
that's amazing. And so, I read about that. You had, you had this appointment scheduler, which is very successful, and you scaled it. And what made it so fascinating was, I had pets. I don't have pets now, but people love their pets. So they're enjoying getting, they want to make sure it's an extension of their family, you know. And so they're going to take a priority. They'll take days off of work for their pets. They want to make sure that they're in the best condition possible. To your point, it's an enjoyable call. A dentist, you can kind of punt because you're like, that's not something that's on my, on my bucket list of any time this year. You kind of get that phone call and you just roll your eyes like, really, the state totally came up and blindsided me now. Now I got to skip work to take a half day to go to the dentist, and you're like, oh, I'll push it off again. So that's incredible.
Yeah, actually, project we're working on now is completely different from that one. It's an avatar that is able to befriend a pregnant mom.
Oh wow!
Beginning after conception, when mom knows she's pregnant,
Yeah.
Until the day until the baby is age 2. So it's the first 1,000 days of life.
That's
And
beautiful.
investing in children during this time frame has been proven by the behavioral economists to have an extraordinary return on investment. And one of the most important parts that they've discovered is that the follow-on teenage years and into their early adult life, they don't have the diseases that are prevalent today in terms of diabetes, obesity, heart disease. A number of things can be prevented by simply investing in the child, beginning soon after conception until age 2 or 3 of the child. And so we're building a software to do that so that it scales to a mass market and can be delivered to the communities that need it most at a very economical price.
That's very beautiful. I'm really eager to see.
Again, most of the world is not paying attention to this time of life. We spend most of our money on postgraduate education, college, and on to graduate degrees. There's an extraordinary amount of money that's spent on humans at a time when their brains are already fully formed and their life script is already written into their expression of their DNA. And so if we can get to those babies early, we can literally change the course of a lifetime.
That is absolutely beautiful. And I think that app is going to be very, it's funny because when something like that comes out, even if, when you don't realize the need of something until it actually hits the market. And then people just gravitate towards it because they're like, thank God somebody finally invented this, because it's almost like when they start investing more in like mental health services, you didn't realize the backlog of how much people really truly needed it until you kept seeing people from all walks of life, all economic backgrounds that were like, yeah, I struggle with this. And then you just saw all of a sudden this massive need of these services, which have long been neglected because everybody thought it's better to get medication or feel the physical when people really need mental health services. So that is an absolutely stellar app that I'm really looking forward to seeing come to market, especially even for dads, for upcoming dads. I know it could help the pregnant woman, but it could lead to bonding time with the pregnant wife, or girlfriend, spouse, to be able to sit back and say, I didn't know you really needed this emotional level of support during this trying time.
Well, and it addresses nutrition and lowering of stress. It addresses the opportunities for building happiness into the expression of DNA through exercise and lowered stress and better nutrition, better access to services. So the automated attendant has the capacity to help them make it to their appointments and facilitate things that a family might have done in the past. But now that we don't live in the nuclear family anymore, we don't have a multi-generational family where a network of support is built in for the pregnant mom.
Right.
especially in the communities where it's needed the most, where these are communities that are essentially a food desert,
Right.
only fast food available,
Right.
access to services are not assumed. And so, we're cutting against the trend in those cases. But that's the population where we can make the most difference.
That's absolutely amazing, and that's wonderful that you're looking at those underserved areas like that too. I have to ask you about your cycling career because this is, I mean, you're a national champion, right? And you've ridden like the amount of miles that you've ridden in cycling. It blows my mind, right? Because I mean, I don't think people realize how hard it is to ride a bicycle. We all learn it as a kid, right? But to stick with it the way that you have and have the accomplishments that you've had in cycling. Can you talk about your background in that?
Well, I was very fortunate in finding something that I love to do. I was a sickly kid who wasn't going to be able to do sports, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing happened when I was about 10 years old. My grandmother, who was a little bit of a revolutionary herself, she sent me a $20 bill. And back then, $20 was a lot of money. I was able to buy a baseball mitt, a catcher's mitt, and 3 baseballs. And I paced off the distance to second base from my front porch, which was concrete steps, and I had a wooden door, so I wasn't breaking any windows. And I drew a square of about 10 inches square on the bottom step, on the face of the bottom step. And I considered that to be second base. And so I just had those 3 baseballs, but I threw the skin off 3 of them in the process of getting very good at throwing someone out at second base from home plate.
Yeah.
And eventually I got the opportunity to try out for my local Little League team. Mm-hmm. And I eventually made the traveling team. And in order to get to the baseball practice, my mother bought me a 1-speed bicycle. And she figured that was something that was not too heavy, athletic. Right. I could be the catcher on the baseball team. I could ride my bicycle to the baseball diamond. Those were things that weren't heavy duty sports.
Right.
And so quietly, I got into cycling.
Yeah.
And not long after that, my dad left us, and my mom said, I really always wanted to go to Europe, but we don't have a lot of money. Maybe we could do it by bicycle. And we rode the whole perimeter of France that summer. And we liked it so much, we decided we wanted to do another long trip the next summer. So when I was 14, we rode from Seattle to Boston, across the whole country.
I saw that. And I'm like, I had to do it because I've flown to Seattle, right? So I haven't been to Boston yet. I mean, that's coast to coast, man. That's a lot of miles cycling, man. That's
so I was
physically taxing.
Yeah, I was hooked. We did 100 miles a day for 40 days. We took some rest days in between, but only about 4 or 5 rest days out of the whole summer. So 4,000 miles in a summer, that turned out to be really something. And of course, we had to train for it. We kept riding after it.
Yeah.
And so I've been riding 10,000 miles or more every year since I was a teenager.
That's
that
crazy.
Adds up.
That's so. What exactly do you do to train your body to prepare for cycling? Right? Is it swimming? Is it obviously calisthenics? Like what encompasses that? Because I do martial arts, but I can't. I mean, you ride a bike, man. Like it is, it's exhausting. I mean, it's really, really tough.
There's I used to say to my Boy Scouts when they would say, "What can I do to train for hiking?" Because they wanted to play lacrosse or do football or something else. And I said, well, the thing to do to train for hiking is to put on a backpack and go hiking. It wasn't so popular, but they did it. And I think that's my answer is that to train for cycling, you do it a lot. And then you kind of ramp into a certain kind of event that winds up being good for you. And I did some very short events. I'm a good sprinter. And then I did very, very long events, 75 to 100, miles of road racing. And so those were the 2 ends of the spectrum that turned out to be good for me. And I'm still doing those. So been great.
I just think when I read about that, and that's not even including on the fact that you had a 1983 thesis from Princeton on nuclear energy, right? Like, so I'm like, I don't think people really realize that when you put your mind in the state that you have, and you've overcome the things that you have, your story is so compelling because you tell it so in depth and so kind of matter of factly kind of a thing. I say this respectfully. It's like a Forrest Gump kind of story, right? Like, where it's just like, yeah, I cycled across the country. Yeah, I built a company. But it's not grandiose. It's just very normal that you just pursued through these type of things. And it wasn't dissing you when I said Forrest Gump, but it's just like, are you kidding me? Like, this gentleman really did all of these things because his mind was in the right place when he did all of them. It's amazing.
Well, I think my another thing my mother loved to say to us was, remember, we're all in this alone. And you think, wow, you had a pretty negative upbringing, but the reality is that you and you alone are responsible for your little edge of the universe.
Right. Yes.
But we are all connected.
Without
And so
question.
everything that you do has an impact on something or someone else. And she taught us to show up interested in the world. And I think that's something that, I don't want to, but I've never been able to shake that sense of waking up every day and being fascinated by what's going on around me and wanting to understand it.
And I think one of the reasons that I created this show was because I had an itch that needed to scratch, right? So it's like, if you're sitting there watching, I mean, I've said this with other guests before. I said, I'm the guy that they always told to shut up, right? Like, teachers always told me to shut up. My friends, we're playing basketball or doing sports, and I'm, talking about, the Colossus of Rhodes or something like that. And they're like, dude, what are you? That doesn't work really well in that circle, right? Like, you gotta, being a nerd now is like the greatest thing on earth, right? Because you got podcasts, you got the internet, you got all these different things in front of you to be a geek, and everybody kind of who was thinking about being fascinated, but was scared, kind of got dragged along, but now it's just okay because it's so normal. So it's like, I had an encyclopedia set in my room as a kid. I read it all the time. We had a computer, when it wasn't necessarily at the forefront of having a computer in every single household. So in a way, we're very similar, where I just like to know, I'll see like a glass bottle. I'll be like, how was that made? Like, how was it? Like, how did they think? Who thought of making glass from sand? Like seriously, like these people who had nothing but their mind to create the environment around them was like, this process is going to create glass. How did you know to do that?
Yeah.
And it's eternal. And the beauty about it is you can always find yourself in that mode because there's nothing stopping you, and especially in this era, because information is so readily available to people.
Right. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that.
Yeah. Well, hey, listen, I haven't built a multi-billion-dollar business, but I'm able to talk to people that have. So I did something, kind of that I can hang my head on a little bit. And you also had real estate as well too.
Yep. It was one of my first jobs after I had a startup that I started while I was in college, and created a bicycle travel bag that's still out there in the marketplace today.
Wow.
We had the business for 5 years, and we made 4,000 bicycle travel bags. And then I thought, well, I really would like to get back to what I studied in college. And so I got a job in real estate. I had been interested and written about urban policy while I was in college. And I went to work in a real estate company, a big real estate company out of Chicago. And each one of us had responsibility for about 500,000 square feet to manage.
Oh, wow.
And that was a great experience for me. And I kind of stumbled up into bigger and bigger properties. And the valuations on those kinds of properties today are extraordinary. But that was really a fantastic career for me at the very beginning of my corporate life.
I've always been very grateful of people who have reached, these heights of success that are willing to share their stories, their background, and the ability to be so open with their stories, because everybody has 24 hours in a day, right? So, and to your point, success is ultimately the 6 inches between your ears can take you places if you're willing to actually put the necessary work into it. Obviously, you don't need me to know where you are coming, to locate you. But for the purpose of the show, where can people find J.C. Chamberlain?
The best place is my website for the first book, which is antidotethebook.com, antidotethebook.com.
Mm-hmm.
And if you click on contact me and send me a message there, I'll send you a link to a life satisfaction survey that I've just launched there, which is built on the 7 pillars of the emotional wealth bank accounts, the seven pillars of emotional wealth. So that would be the best way to find me. And that's where we will publish the next book called Reframe to Gain Your Superpowers. And that'll be out on May 15th of this year.
I can't wait to be able to read that book. And I'm glad you are able to take your time out on this show. I really am honored that you took time out of your very busy schedule to share your success. And for people who are wondering where to find inspiration from, I would challenge them to look inside, persevere, and listen to a little bit of J.C. Chamberlain to get that fire lit under you. And maybe by listening to this episode, you'll find that part of you that stays curious. So I want to thank you for your time. And I'm very honored that you shared your story with me and my audience.
Thank you. I'm honored as well, Rashad. Thank you.
J.C. Chamberlain, it's an honor to be on the Randomness of Nothing podcast. Thank you, sir.